With most of the trim on that roof done and the only remaining trim requiring that the roof be dry on some very wet days, we're gonna change gears. In a week and a half, we have this garage door installed by some installers, people that know more about garage doors than we do. I feel like we could set the tracks themselves, but when it comes to tightening springs, and I don't want to get involved, we'll certainly lean on the experts, and the cost isn't prohibitive. So I think it was $550 to hang this door for 2 guys over the course of a day. Not too bad. So we have 2 tasks that need to be done. The first is we have to frame the second bay here, this bay right here, of our ceiling so that we can hang the tracks from it and suspend the garage door. Robert's on that task. His first order of business is to cut all the joists. We're going to be installing metal up here eventually, and the metal will run this way and require to be screwed in this way. So to that end, we're actually adding some main joists in here and then a bunch of sub joists that are 3 foot on center, which seems like a lot of space, but it should be more than fine for a metal roof and to support the insulation that goes up there. We're going to be attaching it with brackets. We have a combination of saddle brackets and surface mount brackets depending on the location. We're going to be using 2x6 for the main joist and 2x4 for most of the sub joists, with the exception of the joists that hold the garage door itself. The weight of that, we'll be doing 2x6 for that as well. We've got all the lumber. It's left over from the rest of the build, so it'll give us a good chance to get through with that stuff. I'll get it up in a dry location like our ceiling. So Robert's on that task. While he does that, I'm gonna be framing the jamb of the door. Our posts here and our current rough opening is not perfectly square and a little too wide. For example, if you measure from grade board to grade board, it's actually 14.25 inches for a 14-foot wide door, which is a problem. Too wide is not good. Too narrow is actually much better. So we're gonna be tightening that up a little bit. We bought a bunch of 1/4 inch rigid foam, and I'm just gonna stack rigid foam between the sheathing and the post until we build it out to the appropriate rough opening. And the jamb is gonna be moved out as far as it needs to be in the right spot. Also, we're taking the opportunity just to use a laser here to get it perfectly straight up and down. To that end, I have the laser on the spot that we want the actual door rough opening, and then I'm using this guy to give me an 1.5 inches. You can see the thin line there on the outside of the square. This square is 1.5 inches wide here, and that 1.5 inches will basically be the insulation and sheathing. And like I said, any extra gaps here we can fill in with some 1/4 inch pieces of insulation and compress them down to whatever we need to. So right now I got this guy kind of in here, got a grade board setting down there just for fun. We'll get the final grade board in a little bit. And I'm doing some deck screws to hold this in place. It's too long right now. We'll measure it out later, and then I'll cut it off up there by setting the circular saw to about 1.5 inches depth. That's that. Then I'll measure out to the next one, get the laser over here, and we'll repeat the process exactly on this side. Clearly my intention was not to break the grade board. I was pounding on it trying to indent the bolt marks so I could cut them out, and it just snapped. It's not structural really, so I'm gonna glue it back together, coat it with waterproofer, and maybe put some long nails in it just to add strength to it. Let it sit here for a couple days with glue, and it should go back together. It is the right size now, so hopefully that'll work fine, and we'll install it once it's ready. Nice. So I was able to use the 1/4-inch foam to fill in the gap that goes all the way up. Then I've started to cut 8-inch wide 1-inch foam, and then the zip will go right up against that. The corner is not going to be as tight up here, but it'll be fine. We'll tape it and it'll just look a little more rounded and a little less square, which is fine at this stage. And we're going to try to keep everything nice and flush back here because we're going to have some finish plywood over this jamb that will hopefully make it look nice. I would have preferred just to get #1 lumber here that looks nice, that we can use as finished trim, but I can't find #1 lumber anywhere right now. So we're gonna use #2, and I'm gonna finish it with marine grade plywood. That should give some moisture resistance for this kind of sensitive area without, you know, trying to do like ground contact plywood or something like that. It's nice looking ply. We got 2 sheets of it. It's finished on both sides, so we get to choose what side we wanna use. I think that'll look pretty good. You know, the marine grade it's stupid expensive. I think it was $62 a sheet, but it is a better glue. It's unlikely to unravel at the ends, so I'm more comfortable using it to finish off an entryway where the door might be open, things might get wet, yada yada. So it should work just fine. We're not gonna put that on right away. It'll go last. I'll probably finish the whole door jamb with the construction lumber and insulation and zip, and then finish it off with plywood later. We got a bunch of small pieces of zip here, and I'm just gonna run them through the table saw set to 8 inches, and that should give me a really nice edge for this entire opening. I've got both sides all nicely sealed up with foam, leveled out, made nice and straight all the way up, but it took a long time. These are the last 2 posts we put in, and this one in particular, I don't know if you remember way back when, but this guy was shaped like an S, and it was twisted and just an absolute mess. Not only that, but the concrete permacolumns for these were also not that great. We had to do a lot of adjustments trying to get these 2 posts in the right spot, and they still weren't in the right spot. They were about a ½ inch off between the distance between the 2. So we were gonna have to do something to shim it, to adjust it, and to build it out. And it takes a little while to do that nicely. I'm really happy with the end result. We did bring this out a ½ inch, maybe 5/8 inch farther than we had anticipated. It squared up pretty well. So that's pretty much where we're at. Tomorrow, I'm gonna cut off these jambs and put a header jamb, I don't know what to call it, the top jamb, horizontal jamb across it, then work on the foam and zip underneath here to build that up. And at that point, the hard part will be done. All the funking with cutting insulation and shimming it down and all that crap, that'll be done, which is great. And the rest of it should be pretty straightforward. Just cutting the 2x8 supports for the 2 sides, the 2x12 support for the center, and then the last step, which is cutting all that nice plywood to cover the whole surface and make it look very clean. Yeah, it should go pretty darn well, I think. Ready, dog? Do you need to go for a walk? Do you want to go for a walk? Let's go. Come on. That step is done. Basically, I've got the jamb 2x6 up there, straight across. It is nice and straight. Well, it's both level and true in this direction. So that's great. I did have to shim it maybe a 1/16 of an inch, but that's not too shabby. This door is very square and that's what we're going for. Obviously, I still have to insulate and sheathe the underside of it. That's not too big of a deal. I think it's gonna require an extra inch of insulation because I lowered it so much. The door opening, we framed it too wide, which is bizarre that we made it too big, but we decreased it to 13 and 11.5 wide and 12, 11.5 tall. Since it was a 1/2 inch wide to begin with, all in all, we decreased it somewhere between 3/4 of an inch and a full inch. Not a big deal. We just fill it with extra foam. So this side's got 1.5 inches of foam. This side has 1.25 inches of foam, and the top looks like it'll take 2 inches. Not a big deal. The nice thing is with this rigid foam and sheathing pressed against it, it's really solid. It doesn't really compress much. The nailer seems to penetrate appropriately and hold it just nice and tight. Robert's got a massive task here as he starts mounting the hangers on the main joists for the ceiling. Again, I'm not gonna call that beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's perfect in every way.
It is not perfect in every